All right. Well, I will call the Harris Ranch Community Infrastructure District Number 1 Board Meeting of August 10th, 2020 to order. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Clegg,
Here.
Thompson, Woodings.
Here.
2 present, 1 absent.
Thank you. Second order of business on our agenda is approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of January 23rd, 2020.
Madam Chair, I move approval of the minutes.
Second. Any discussion? Would the clerk please call the roll?
Clegg,
Yes.
Woodings.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Third item on our agenda is the public hearing for the FY 2021 budget for the infrastructure district and a resolution HR CID 8 2020. David Hasagawa will be presenting. Welcome, David.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, members of the board, and residents of Harris Ranch. The purpose of today's meeting is twofold. The first is to receive public input from residents of the district. And the second is to vote on the resolution to approve the budget before it goes to Ada County. The district's purpose itself is to accelerate or to expedite construction of public infrastructure within the district. And this is accomplished primarily through the issuance of bonds. So let's take a quick look at the budget itself. The budget is primarily focused on raising support for the debt service through the use of levies and an assessment for both the outstanding bonds that are presently with the district and for future debt issuances of the district. The debt issuances are used primarily to pay for projects that have already been completed by the developer. And the way that works is that each year the developer submits a reimbursement report to the district for review. If the projects are eligible in that reimbursement report, that is, it meets the definition of public infrastructure and the requirements for reimbursement, then it is submitted to the district board for approval. And then upon approval, bonds are issued to actually enact the reimbursement. Now, eligibility is based off of 2 things. Number 1, it's based off of Idaho state law. And the second, it's based off of a developer agreement that was signed by the city, the district itself, and the Harris Family Limited Partnership. And some of those requirements for reimbursement are that the projects have followed public bidding rules and that the projects are turned over for public ownership or public right-of-way or easements. The projects must also, and this is critical, directly or indirectly benefit the district itself by having a substantial nexus to the district. And then similarly to the city, the district follows a public approval process of its budget each year. That process starts with a budget workshop, which has already been held. And then we hold a public hearing, which is what we're doing today. And then finally, upon approval of the budget will be reaffirmed in a 3rd meeting prior to submission to Ada County. And before we open up the meeting for public input, I wanted to identify one of the challenges that is unique to the district that is distinct from the challenges that the city is facing. The district's levy is set at 2.85 mils or 0.285%. And for most levies, Eric Villamoria, the city budget manager, last month testified that as housing prices increase, the relative proportion of the levy decreases for most levies, whether that's the city of Boise, Ada County, the school districts. However, for the city of Boise, for the Harris Ranch Community Infrastructure District, that levy is set. And so what happens is that as housing prices increase, the relative proportion of that levy does increase. Now, this is by design. With that functionality, it allows for new debt to be issued to pay for future reimbursements. And the way that it was originally designed is that rise or increased construction within the district would help to pay for that. However, when you have rapid increases in housing prices, that throws that balance off. And so that's one of the challenges that we're facing today and that will need to be addressed. This year's budget proposes approximately $2 million in new debt issuance to support reimbursement of projects that have been submitted by the developer. Those projects include reimbursements for roundabouts on East Park Center, land value used for stormwater ponds along Warm Springs Avenue, and the relocation of power lines from above ground to below ground, and then finally costs associated with the realignment of Warm Springs Creek. So that concludes my prepared remarks. I will stand for any questions, or we can move to the public input.
Thank you. Questions for David?
Yeah, Madam Chair,
Yes.
and maybe, I'm not sure if the developer's on the call or not, and maybe this would be a question for them. David, how would these expenses normally be paid for in a regular development that we would see in the city of Boise?
Yeah, that is a good question. I can give you my high-level understanding. However, the developer would be the better person if they are available to answer that. Doug Fowler.
Keith
I'll-
Clark. Yeah.
I'll just give my understanding is that primarily those prices would be included in the price of the house itself. But I'll let
Madam
Doug if
Chair,
he's available.
Yes.
Doug Fowler is on.
Doug, would you care to address that question? Have you promoted him? Okay.
Mr. Fowler is muted.
Yeah, typically, unless you're in a urban renewal district or like CCDC, a developer would pay for the costs of the infrastructure, and one of the and would not get reimbursed for that. And what that does then is drive the price of higher. Here are the choices that we made early on in consultation with the city and the first formed community infrastructure district, and that is this: if you are going to buy a house, for example, and you buy that house for $400,000, and you have a tax on that house, say that costs $1,200 a year. If you didn't have a CID, you would probably then pay $425,000 for the house, because the costs have to be reimbursed somehow, or the project doesn't pencil. So it's kind of 6 to 1 in one way of thinking, half dozen the other. What the CID does is allow you to plan a project the size of Harris Ranch with, in this case, the specific district ordinance. Instead of piecemealing a development and selling off 20 or 30 acres at a time, it allows you to have a cohesive plan for a large project, in this case, a $50 million bonding capacity, so that you can ensure that the project has a financing mechanism to get finished. We all saw back in the Great Recession, a lot of larger projects that when the bank financing dried up, the project was left unfinished. So that was really the reason for forming the community infrastructure district. And sorry for the long answer, but it's a simple question, but it's a complex answer. And that is, it allows us to do a lot of things that we wouldn't be able to do because we know we're going to get reimbursed. It allows us to do things like 6-foot wide sidewalks instead of, when we started the project, you could do 4-foot wide sidewalks. Even now you can do 5-foot wide sidewalks. It allows us to do 8-foot wide planter strips. It allows us to have a ton of open space in the foothills, and allows us to have some mini parks, and allows us to, we can't get reimbursed, for instance, for a postal pavilion out at Harris Ranch, that we have 3 and we're getting ready to start a 4th one, but allows us to take take other funds and build those. So it's, I hope that explains it, at least in a nutshell.
Yeah, thank you. It's, I think, such a different structure than I think what a lot of folks are used to. And it just struck me that it very closely mirrors a lot of the big infrastructure work that the city does. You know, you have the choice of either paying for it up front and having all of the current users pay for all of that infrastructure, or potentially going into debt for it and paying for it over a series of years and having future users also paying for that infrastructure. So thank you for the clarification, Doug.
Sure, and one thing I would add, even as low as mortgage rates are today, with the exception of the special assessment, which is going to be refinanced here in not too distant future, the CID general obligation bonds, which make up the majority of it, that interest rate, I believe, has been running in the 2s. So it's good financing.
Thank you. David, I have a couple of questions, and Doug, if you'll hang out here, some of them might be, you might want to pipe in on these as well. So the 2.85 levy amount is set by state law. Is there any provision in that state law to collect less than that?
Yes, absolutely. The lower bound is really the commitment that the district has already made to the existing bonds. So as long as we maintain that, then yes, we could. Part of the reason to keep things level at that 2.85 mils is simply to try and avoid large changes in the levy itself. But yes, less could be collected as long as it did not fall below what the district has committed to paying for debt service.
Okay, and another question then related to that, when the development agreement was written, this is kind of a 2-part question. There was a $50 million limit that cannot be increased, if I'm correct. But in addition, the plan that was certified in that development agreement was for infrastructure and services that substantially serve Harris Ranch residents. Were there any provisions in that? And Doug, this is where you might want to pipe in after David's done. Were there any provisions on the bigger infrastructure to ensure that Harris Ranch was paying proportionate share and not more than their share? In other words, on a,
Yeah.
on the more regionally serving facility of Warm Springs, is there a proportionate share clause in that portion of it? I can't remember, so.
I am not aware of one. I'll ask our counsel if
Yeah.
he's aware of anything in there. But having just reviewed the developer agreement prior to this meeting, I'm not aware of any intent to do so.
Okay,
In the
and
developer
Doug, did
agreement.
you have any comment on that one?
Yes, Madam Chair and Councilmember Woodings. Yes, unfortunately, for instance, when we put in the bypass road, we have to pay 100% of that, even though that may serve people at either end of Harris Ranch. The highway district does not say, okay, here, and have a factor. Neither does the power company. Idaho Power, if you're going to put some lines underground, Idaho Power does not tell you, okay, look, you're running lines that are going to take care of properties east of Harris Ranch. So what's actually going to Harris Ranch is only about 80% of this. So we, Idaho Power, are going to pay 20% of that cost. No, you pay for all of the cost that runs through the property you're developing. The city of Boise, on the other hand, handles sewer a little bit differently. But I would like to point out that on the 2.85 mils, when we organized the CID, we set a limit of at that. There are other CIDs that set the limit that have been formed that have set that limit at 7 mils. And we wanted to limit that to 3 mils, which is the 2.85 plus any administration costs, to a maximum of 3 mils because it truly was and truly is a financing mechanism to ensure the long-term success of the project.
Okay, thank you. Final question that I have, trying to remember, the CID is now almost a decade old. And
Yes.
at what point, is there any call in the documents to renew the plan for the infrastructure that hasn't been completed yet?
Madam Chair, I'm not aware of any.
Okay, and is there any desire on the part of the Harris Ranch developers to look at that plan and make sure everything's still as should be, or are you confident that it is?
Madam Chair and Council Member Wooding, we are right now in negotiations with some people for the town center that would involve looking at the village green, and could there be some modifications to that? There certainly could be, but as far as the overall infrastructure, it's pretty well set. We have right now, in one form or another, we have all the remaining developable property in Harris Ranch either under contract or being negotiated.
All right, thank you. That's all the questions I had. Did you have anything else, Councilmember Woodings?
No, I think I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. So before I open the public hearing, which we will do here in just a second, one more little quick note about community infrastructure districts. The state of Idaho created the statute that allows those, and in this case, this was formed in that statute. There's a requirement that the 3 board members of the district be 3 council members or 3 commissioners from the jurisdiction that governs the land. And so that's why city council members are the board members of this. I just didn't know if some of the folks who might be testifying today knew that, so I wanted to make sure that you did. So with that, we have no one. I will open the public hearing. We have no one in chambers in person. We do have 5 people who pre-signed up online, so we'll go through those in order to begin with, and then we'll see if there's anyone else online that would like to testify. So the first person I have signed up is Charles Hooker. Charles or Chad, are you there?
Yes, ma'am, I am. Thank you. So,
Thank you.
Doug, I appreciate the information that you provided. It's good to get the background. As a new resident that moved in a year and a half ago, I found it rather challenging to find information about the CID, specifically what projects have been done to date, what budgets were allocated, were they on budget, were they completed, and it was very difficult to find that information out there publicly on the website. It was kind of a choose your own adventure book. So it would be great if the council could provide that detail. In fact, Ms. Clegg, I had emailed your office specifically and was never received anything back. Number two, Doug, you mentioned all the benefits of the CID. One thing that I would like to say that would be great to have under consideration is the fact. Sorry, Ms. Clegg.
Thank you. Could you give us your name and address, please? That's one of the requirements of testifying. Sorry about that. I didn't tell you.
Oh, sorry, no problem. Chad Hooker, 2306 South Trapper.
Thank you. Go ahead.
The next is, you mentioned all those benefits. One thing that is a little bit of a collateral out of that is the fact that the CID is drawn with some irregular lines that puts homeowners on right next to each other paying and some not paying. So whenever these fees are levied and they're continued to increase, that puts an unfair or a disadvantage to homeowners trying to sell with their neighbor right across the street or right next to them, not part of the CID. So would like to know from the council's perspective, who in the council is responsible for being the voice for the neighborhood? You said that there's council members that are on this board, but is there any representation from someone directly impacted by the levies of the CID?
We'll stop the clock here for a second. I'll answer that. As you know, Boise City does not have districts, which means all of your council members represent you. I would say in this case, it's actually easier for council members who are not on the CID board to work with you, because those of us who are, if we work with you, then perhaps bias our actions as board members. So yes, you do have representation, any of the council members, but particularly those who are not on the CID board in this case.
So would it be fair to say that we would have the commitment from this board to help answer and support us?
Certainly, we will. This is the first time we've had a lot of public input on these, and we are trying to pull together some information to get out to you, and we'll make a commitment to do that.
I would greatly appreciate that, because as I had mentioned previously, I sent multiple emails and requests for meetings for you personally, Ms. Clegg, to be able to discuss these questions that many of our residents moving into Harris North are experiencing as they're learning about the CID and the impacts to our taxes and our value of our home next to a home next to us.
Thank you. Did you have more?
No, ma'am.
Thank you. Appreciate
Madam
that.
Chair,
Yes.
I just wanted to respond to Mr. Hooker a little bit. We did receive emails from many people. We have never received emails or had any kind of public interest in these hearings in the past. And so it was kind of surprising, I think, to those of us on the board. I did read all of them. I didn't respond because it would, in many ways, bias my position on this board. And so I just wanted to make sure that folks know that their emails were received and read. Maybe I should have sent that back in a short email just to let everyone know, but I didn't. I think like everyone else, I'm, perhaps struggling a little bit as a stay-at-home full-time parent and part-time city council member. So it's hard to keep up. But I did want to just let everyone know that we're not used to having this much input. There was a lot of input received and read, and I'm sorry if it wasn't responded to in the ways that people would have liked it to have been.
Ms. Whittings, I'm referring to emails that I sent starting over 18 months ago with no response, as well as recently. So I understand the current situation. I understand the strain that's under. And to your point about not finding interest, I found it very hard to even find these meetings. They seem to have been scheduled and then rescheduled with limited input or limited notice to the public at large to be able to make accommodations to be able to attend and view these meetings.
Thank you. I appreciate that input, and I would echo Councilmember Woodings and agree that our email response system is not as strong as it needs to be. We're working on it. I hope everyone recognizes that in these awkward times, we have received over 5,000 emails on the subject of police funding. And not to say that other things got lost in the translation, but it has been quite a struggle to attempt to keep up with actually responding to every email that we get. I have also read all of them and certainly would echo that this is the first time we've received interest in this. In terms of changing the schedule, I would tell you that, again, because of the issues around the police budget, we were forced to change a lot of things on our schedule. It frankly wouldn't have been my first choice to do that, but it was in the best interest of the public at large to do that on the larger budget of the city. So certainly can understand your frustration around that as well. It's been a difficult year that way, and we'll certainly take that input to heart. Next person I have on the list is Charlene Valentine. Charlene, are you here? I see you showing on my list, and hopefully you've been promoted to be able to speak.
Oh, there we go. Can I, I'm just gonna pass my time. It was, I'm new, very new to the neighborhood, only a couple months, and I'm learning, and I thought I had to check that box in order to get into this. We had some difficulty, and you'll find the same from Roger. Some of our questions are being answered right now, and believe me, we've got a lot more questions, but I need to hear everything. So if you could put Roger and Charlene, put us off on doing any testimony at this point.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Next on the list is Larry Crowley. And before you testify, if you'd give us your name and address. And Larry, you're up.
Can you hear me, Madam Chair?
Yes, we can.
You can. Okay, thank you. My name is Larry Crowley. Address is 3738 South Harris Ranch Avenue, Boise, Idaho. I'm here this afternoon to speak to the existing and growing dissatisfaction with the Harris Ranch Community Infrastructure District Number 1. I'd like to respond in part to the question raised by Board Member Woodings and to some of Doug's comments about the differences between what normally happens in developments and what the CID does. I've submitted 2 letters to you expressing my dissatisfaction for the reasons that were not covered by Doug. And that is that while the developer with the CID doesn't have to pay the expenses or bear the costs of or associated with the development that he's involved with, those costs have to be borne by somebody. And in this case, it's taxpayers who are bearing the costs. And it's just a small number of taxpayers, homeowners who have purchased property in Harris Ranch that happens to lie within the boundaries of the CID. We received our first full year tax bill just about 2.5 months ago, and started looking at it and found that 20% of our total property tax was CID tax related, which far exceeded that which we were told it was going to be at the time we were considering buying property in Harris Ranch. We were looking at a number of options. And we were told at the time that the tax would be slightly higher than that paid by other homeowners or property owners here in Harris Ranch or in the city of Boise. Well, we find out that it's 20% of our total taxes. And when you compare that amount against a house or a resident that's not inside the boundaries, it's about 26% higher than the same house, with the same value located outside the boundary of the CID. The same as Mr. Hooker mentioned, it was difficult to find information about the CID, how it functions, and how we got ourselves into a situation where we're paying thousands of dollars more in property taxes than most Boise residents. And so as we looked into it, we became more dissatisfied with it. And that's why you're now seeing the kind of responses and participation by the public that you probably haven't seen in the past. Notification to homeowners or property taxpayers in Harris Ranch is virtually non-existent. We never know, we didn't know any specifics about what we were getting into at the time we purchased the property, only that we were in the district and that our taxes are going to be slightly higher. We think there's a need, a dramatic and desperate need for some changes to what we now have in place. And we've offered some remedies for your consideration. And we're here today in part, not only to let you know of our concerns about the taxes that we're paying, how discriminatory they are and how unfair they are, but also trying to figure out some way that we can stop this process and get some parity with our property taxes.
I appreciate that. You are now almost a minute over your 3 minutes. I don't want to truncate the discussion here. I do realize that many of you have some of the same concerns. Given that the Valentines chose not to testify, I'll give you another 3 minutes if you can. We did read all of the letters that came with those 3 points in them, so I believe we're all clear on what those are. But if you want to talk to them specifically in those 3 minutes, if you can do that in that time, I'd sure appreciate it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd be glad to. The points that we were making are one is to find some way to stop the incurrence of additional debt that encumbers our property without our knowledge or consent. One of the most frustrating things about all of this is that people are making decisions that affect us and our property without ever notifying us about it and telling us what the impacts of these projects and the financing is going to be. Until we get that part of it straightened out, we'd like to have everything stopped with respect to encumbering any more debt on our property and creating this unreasonable and unfair tax obligations that we're dealing with. So one of our requests to you were to suspend anything that would create additional debt obligations that homeowners would have to bear instead of the developer. A lot of the expenses that Mr. Fowler referred to, I view as being pretty standard development related kind of expenses and should be the responsibility of the developer. And if they increase the price of the property that's for sale, that's how the market works. Everybody, all the developers are dealing with the same issues. Harris Ranch is no different. And you probably have gotten letters from some of our homeowners who are more direct about their concerns and feelings about this process than what I have suggested. And we'll just keep it at that. So what we're asking is that we suspend any additional financings that would just do nothing but increase our current tax burdens. Secondly, is that in the future going forward, is that at a minimum, we get notification, direct notification from the developer or the owner as to what's being planned and how much it would affect our property taxes. Third is that we'd like to have some voting on these tax obligations. If we're going to be asked to pay taxes no differently than any other bond issue, we should have the right to understand what is being proposed, and how much it's going to cost, and how it's going to affect us as property owners. The other part of this is that we were hoping to be able to talk about getting some immediate relief on the current tax situation, either reducing the mill levy or expanding the boundaries of the CID to include other neighborhoods in Harris Ranch. Those of us in the CID constitute about 1/3 of the property of Harris Ranch. The other 2/3 do not pay the CID tax. And so it goes back to the point being made by Mr. Hooker. If you live on a street, part of that street may be in the CID and paying $1,500 or $2,000 a year more in property taxes than your neighbor. And when it comes time to sell, you're going to be at a significant disadvantage in trying to resell your property because of that additional tax burden. So we're looking for ways from this board that we can address those inequities, and try and get our taxes, our property taxes, at parity with everybody else in Harris Ranch and with the city of Boise. Now, I don't know what the authorities are of this board and what your capabilities are with respect to dealing with that request or dealing with these issues of such unjust tax differences. But we are very concerned about it, and we're here because of that. And we're hoping that we can find some ways to get some parity in our property taxes.
Thank you.
So,
I appreciate that. I am going to ask one question about notification. How does notification of the budget and the budget workshop go out, and to whom?
Yeah, Madam Chair, absolutely. So the state statute requires that 10 days prior to the public hearing, which is the meeting we're having today, that notification be posted in the Idaho Statesman, as well as in a prominent place within Harris Ranch. And so at this point, what we do is at each of the postal pavilions, we set up notifications. So we work with the developer and their team to set up notifications prior to these meetings. And so in this particular case for today, because the meeting was rescheduled, we did repost those notifications in both the Statesman as well as the postal pavilions.
Okay, thank you. So no direct mail notification.
No, Madam Chair.
Okay, and then you mentioned this budget hearing. Do all of the CID board meetings, are all of them notified in that way, or just the hearing?
Madam Chair, only this meeting, the public hearing.
Okay, so that is something, though, that we could choose to do more than the state law requires as a minimum.
Madam Chair, absolutely.
Thank you. All right.
Madam Chair.
Did you have any questions or comments?
Yes, I think I ask this question almost every year since I've been on this board, about how potential residents of Harris Ranch inside the CID are informed that they live within this community and infrastructure district and what that impact might be. And so, and I've always had a concern about it, which is why I always ask. And I know that I've asked Mr. Fowler over and over the same question, because I see the conflict that a real estate agent might have in selling a home and being completely transparent about the impact of what living in a CID might be, because they might, they could potentially lose a sale. And so I'm wondering if there's a better way to inform, and I don't think that this is like the silver bullet to what's going on in this situation, but I'm wondering if there's a better way to inform potential residents, potential property owners in the community infrastructure district of what the impacts could be, whether that's kind of a side-by-side analysis of tax levies or that type of thing. It just seems like, it's always seemed to me like that could be more transparent on the front end to minimize surprises later on down the road.
Madam Chair, Board Member Woodings, the state statute does require that each homeowner within the district receive notification of the levy that will be placed on the property. And actually I hinted at the beginning, there's two. There's actual general obligation bond and a special assessment. And so disclosures are required to be placed on both of those. And so the district as well as the developer have worked with the title companies, which helps to give a little bit of impartiality so that it's not the real estate agent themselves to have those be provided at the actual signing of documents. And so we're working with the developer to review and to strengthen that process to make sure that those documents do go out to each homeowner every single time.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Tom Payne.
Madam Chair, Tom Payne is not on the virtual meeting any longer.
Okay, Tom Payne is not on the line. Is there anyone else who would wish to testify?
Madam Chair, I have several people that would like to testify,
Okay,
and we can start with Rory O'Connor.
Maureen.
Rory O'Connor.
Okay, Rory O'Connor, you are up. It looks like your microphone is unmuted, but we're not hearing you yet. Rory, can you hear us? You could type in the chat if you need to.
He's stating that he's calling in.
What's that?
He stated that he's calling in. I'm sorry, Madam Chair.
Shall we move to the next one while he's getting back online? Or,
Madam Chair, the next people I have is Lorraine Wilson.
all right, Lorraine Wilson, are you ready to testify? We have you.
Yes, my husband Brian and I are both sitting here, and Brian wanted to testify, so we raised our hand.
Can you hear us?
Yes, we can hear
Great.
you. Name and address, please.
So this is Brian and Lorraine Wilson, and we live at 3716 South Millbrook Way, obviously here in Boise and Harris Ranch. I think a number of our concerns have already been addressed, but I think I would say that our principal concern is based on the nature of the expenditures and the improvements that the improvement district is paying for benefit a much broader group of individuals than those of us that are in the district and in fact paying for the improvements. I think in my mind, the best example of that is the fire station, which covers the entire area out here. And yet we as residents in the district paid for that fire station, as I understand. My second, I guess, concern would be, and again, this has been addressed already, is that we have very little information about what is in the district, what it has paid for thus far, what it is planned to pay for in the future. And again, we have no say as to whether or not those expenditures would appear to be proper, that they would benefit us principally and directly. I don't think it's correct and appropriate that we are paying for improvements that we only have an indirect interest in, and yet a very broad group of individuals benefit from that. As been mentioned, we have received absolutely no communication regarding the improvement district. Nothing has ever been posted at our postal pavilion. Yes, I'm sure that we did sign a document at a title company, but that's very. So, thank you.
Thank you. Is Rory O'Connor now available?
No, he is still having difficulties calling in, Madam Chair.
Okay. Shall we go to Edward Winkleman?
So Madam Chair, we do have Edward Woman ready.
Thank you. Edward, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Edward Winkleman, 2400 South Trapper Place.
Yes, go
And
ahead.
I'd like to just kind of redirect it back to trying to get an answer from you or a commitment to future information here to what Mr. Hooker was asking about. Because when I look at this map and how these lines were divvied up, they really don't make a lot of sense to me. Again, I've been here just 1 year in Harris North, so a lot of this is, new information I'm trying to get caught up on. So I guess I'd like to push you back to, giving us an answer on the original question Mr. Hooker asked, which was, who made up these lines? Who made up the, and why are some included? Because when I look at this, it looks to me like part of my lot is in it and part of it isn't.
Thank you. I'll attempt a quick answer to that question, and then I'll turn to our staff person. The district is based on a state statute that allows large developments like this ranch to, rather than build the infrastructure as the development goes forward, actually build the infrastructure with an understanding that it will get reimbursed over time. In a typical development, they'd build it and reimburse themselves by charging for it in the lot price. In this case, they do it through the CID. The CID is set at the time the development is approved and the infrastructure district is created. I think I'm hearing a lot of questions today that actually bring up good questions in my mind about whether the state statute is adequate. It may not be. We don't control that. What we control is the existing plan that included all of Harris Ranch and, as I understand it, a few ancillary subdivisions adjacent and not other subdivisions within the Barber Valley. I recognize that doesn't seem to be quite equitable, but it was set up that way prior to those subdivisions even being thought of. So we are where we are today. The plan was based on the development agreement that was passed at the time that the development itself was approved many years ago. And that plan has changed very little. I think there's been a couple of very minor modifications. Thus my question early in the hearing today about whether or not there was a need to review it or at least take a look at it. So I think all of these are good questions. And certainly I think need to have further discussion going forward. Today, what we're here for is to talk about this year's budget and whether or not to go ahead and certify it. David, did I miss anything or misspeak on anything?
Madam Chair, I believe yes, you are correct, especially when it comes to the state statutes. I think that I would love to hear Doug's input on the original lines if you still would like to address that side. I would say that from what we've seen, that is one of the challenges of the development being overlaid on top of the district itself. But I would defer to developers' experience with the actual drawing of the district.
Do I still have time for on my allotment for a quick question?
You still had about 50 seconds left. If you have something else you'd like to address in those 50 seconds, you're welcome.
Yeah, I can talk really quickly. Just again, I've only been out here a year, actually moved from the north end. Question, as I'm trying to kind of figure out who's all in, connected to this. Is there anybody on the council that actually resides in Harris North or in Harris Ranch?
At present, no. Even if we went to districts, it's frankly, there wouldn't be any guarantee of that.
Is there anybody on this council that used to live out here?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay.
There is a former council member who lives there.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. All right.
Madam Chair, we actually have Roy O'Connor has been able to call in, but we also have Tom Payne who had signed up in advance and he's now back online.
Okay. I think we'll go with Tom Payne first, and then Rory will get you after Mr. Payne. Tom, are you ready?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh,
You have both a computer and a phone on. You want to turn your computer
okay.
audio down.
No, I'm on the Oregon coast and have a bad connection apparently. I will send an email to those of you regarding my testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. Really appreciate that. Thank you very much. All right, now we have Rory O'Connor.
Thank you very much for your patience. Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes, if you could speak up just a little bit. It's sometimes hard without the visual.
Will do. Is that better?
Thank you.
I just wanted to throw my support behind Mr. Crowley's well thought out response. I'm wondering about what the board's powers in this case are. I think he's proposed very reasonable expectations and remedies. You had alluded to just kind of approving the budget or not, but are the other remedies proposed something that is within your power to do?
I'll turn to my staff member.
And sorry, Mr. O'Connor, could you repeat your last question?
For the remedies that Mr. Crowley had laid out in his letter to the council members, are the remedies that he proposed actionable by the council members?
Yeah, Madam Chair, yes, they are actionable. However, the developer agreement does have certain constraints. And so those constraints are things that the council or the board of directors will need to consider. For example, the developer agreement states that the district cannot or shall not unreasonably deny or refuse to consider a report. And if it is eligible, it cannot be unreasonably denied. And so that's one of the constraints that the board must consider is that for projects that were part of the plan for the district and are also eligible per some of the criteria that I stated at the beginning, that they're publicly bid, that they be turned over for public ownership, and that they substantially benefit the district, then the expectation of the board is that they approve those projects as submitted by the developer. So while the board could choose to take action, they do have a duty to the agreement that was signed between the district itself, the city of Boise, and the Harris Family Limited Partnership. So,
can you tell me who determines the reasonableness of the, what is being proposed? Is that determined by the council members? Is that determined by the developer, or is that some outside court?
yeah, Madam Chair, Mr. O'Connor, the reasonableness is established by the district staff and then recommended to the board of directors. And so when we look at a project, we are looking to make sure that it meets the specific criteria. And I would say that since I know we are running towards the end of our meeting, that if you are interested in continuing the conversation with me directly, I'm always happy to answer any of the residents' questions. You can reach me at boisetreasury@cityofboise.org, and I'll be happy to go through more of those details with you.
Thank you. I will take you up on that offer. I apologize I didn't give my address at the beginning. It's 2862 South Palmatier Way, Boise, 83716.
Thank you.
One
I
other
was-
comment I just might make. I'm sorry, am I out of time?
I was just going to add that based on today, it's clear to me that as a board, we need to determine a better way to report on the activities of the infrastructure district. And I'll make the commitment today to work with staff to figure out what that is. I can't tell you exactly what it will be, but clearly we need to make this information more easily accessible and available.
Madam Chair, I'd just like to add to that. One of the benefits of being at home is that I have two screens here, so I can pull up websites and kind of like go through the process that a new resident might go through when they're looking for information on the CID. And I think that we can do much better with getting the information out on which projects are being included in the CID, where the boundaries are. And I think that there's a lot of transparency that we can work through to make available.
Thank you. Did you have anything else, Mr. O'Connor? You still have a bit of time.
The other thing I'd like to comment on is the mail pavilions. It seems like there's some wasteful spending there. I've never had a mail pavilion that was heated, air conditioned, and had a television in it. I just don't think that that is a necessary thing. You know, I've gotten mail for many years in Boise, Idaho, just in my mailbox, and there's no heating and air conditioning. So I guess I would like that to be as part of the reasonableness of that. It just seems like there needs to be someone that's watching those kind of things. So that's why I kind of asked that question. It's like, who decided that that was a necessary item? I don't know.
Thank you. I believe that those operating costs are actually paid for by the HOA and not through the CID.
That's another black box, in my opinion.
Okay.
All right, I relinquish my time. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. All right. Madam Clerk, so who would be next on our list?
Madam Chair, we have Karen Henderson.
All right, Karen Henderson, if you are ready, name and address, please, and we'd love to hear from you.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. Karen Henderson, 3716 South Harris Ranch Avenue, Boise. Madam Chairman, Board, thank you for your time. I just had two quick things. I have a lot of comments, but just to keep it short, just so we're all clear, the map does not, the boundaries of the CID does not include all of Harris Ranch. I think if you did include all of Harris Ranch and all of Harris North, including new construction, there's new construction being done that's not included in the boundaries, then it would be a little bit more equitable in the sense that everyone who says I'm part of the Harris Ranch development is paying all the same taxes. Second comment is a little bit of a question. You know, Idaho Code 50-30101 says the only things that can be paid for with the CID have to be owned by the state or a political subdivision. And my understanding of the agreement is that as a condition of reimbursement and payment is that the public takes ownership of that, for those facilities. So one question I have is, last year, the Barber Junction ponds were paid for, but the fee title is still in the name of Barber Valley Development, Inc. I know that the city has an easement across it, but what was paid for with public funds was based on a May 2019 appraisal that was for the entire fee title, not the amount of an easement. And there were some extraordinary assumptions made in that appraisal, which I will not get into. But that aside, if the public pays to own the entire property, not just to have the right of an easement, then they need to own in full that property. And I would like to know, and I think that needs to be consistent going forward before the CID reimburses for any future projects, that title be properly handed over to either the city or the county in full fee title, if that's what it's going to be based on. So I would just like to know what the timing is on a full fee title transfer of the Barber Junction ponds, as just one example, to the city of Boise. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Does staff have any answer for that question? We may not be able to answer your question today, but we can get one, or perhaps it looks like perhaps the developer has an answer. I'd accept that if you're willing, Doug.
Yes, Madam Chair and Council Member Woodings and Karen Henderson and everybody else. We'll certainly look into that and make sure that title has been transferred. If it has not, it certainly will be. We're aware of political subdivision of the state needs to take ownership. If I may, I'd like to offer. We have a complete list, and I'm sure the staff does as well, of everything that has been reimbursed to date on a line item basis. I would also offer and clarify that there are no CID funds that are spent on a postal pavilion. There are no CID funds spent on the fire station building. There was, I think, $100,000 of CID funds spent on the land itself and on some of the roads around the fire station, but nothing on the building. As far as the disparity on property taxes of when the CID was formed, we could only form a CID on property that the Harris Family Limited Partnership owned. There are 6 blocks in Dallas Harris Estates, which we're in the first phases of development that are not owned, and were not owned at the time by the Harris Family Limited Partnership. There's also a small section in the foothills that is not in the CID, and we can expand the CID without if I recall correctly, without a 2/3 vote. So, but that is why you see that disparity. We have tried to be very, very open to anyone that's ever wanted to come in and ask for any information at all. We haven't had that to date, that we've turned anybody down yet, nor will we in the future. And we're happy to sit down and show anybody what it is that has been approved and reimbursed so far. To give you an idea of what we're kind of up against is we have worked very hard to make sure that when people move into Harris Ranch and they buy into Harris Ranch, they know what they're getting into. We got all the real estate brokers together early on and said, taxes are going to be higher. There's a special assessment and there's a maximum 3 mills. And we're doing that so we had to ensure the long-term financial success of Harris Ranch. And to give you an idea of what I mean by that, we currently have about 18 million in items that are that will eventually be submitted that we believe are in accordance with the statute, because we've counted on that development agreement and the $50 million bonding capacity and have gone ahead and spent funds accordingly. For a very small example of that is the fencing around the Barber Junction ponds. We lobbied very hard, and yes, it was more expensive to put in the wrought iron fencing because the highway district wanted us to put in chain link fencing. So And what we told the brokers early on was, we're going to tell you need to let people know we're doing this financing mechanism to ensure the long-term financial success, because and your taxes are going to be higher because of it. Give us a few years, and then when people say, boy, our taxes are higher at Harris Ranch than they are at another subdivision, we hope people say, yeah, but have you seen it out here? Because all of those extra things, a lot of which are not covered by the CID, cost money. So I hope that adds at least some clarity. But again, we have an open door policy. We publish a developer report monthly and have our name and phone number, and we haven't turned anybody down yet. So, but I appreciate everybody's comments.
Thank you for those clarifications. You still have a little bit of time. Karen, did you have anything more?
No, I'm not at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, Madam Chair, or Madam Clerk, I'm sorry, who else do we have?
Madam Chair, we have Jim Riley who would like to testify.
Okay, Jim Riley, you are up.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, Board. Jim Riley, 2367 South Trapper. I would just want to reiterate a comment and a line to what I heard so far this morning from, I believe, Mr. Crowley, Mr. Van Kampen, Mr. Wilson, Mr. Broyles, in regards to their requests. In addition to that, I believe another conversation was around just a continued expansion of the city surroundings to ensure that there is better parity of the tax implications of the CID. I think what we've heard over and over again, there's just a certain group of homeowners that are within that CID that are paying a larger tax. And then I just had a question. I don't know if this was addressed earlier, but if I understand the bond financing is at about a 7% interest, is there an opportunity to go ahead and refinance that bond at a better interest rate than what would be paid today, which, hopefully would offset, any future tax costs?
I will turn that question over to our staff.
Yeah, Madam Chair, the 7%, I believe, was calculated as in looking at the budget. And while I have not calculated that myself to confirm that the average is 7%, I would believe that is a reasonable calculation. The reason for that primarily is the special assessment bond, which was financed at 9% at the beginning, as well as some of the early financings were financed at a much higher percentage due to the fact that the tax base of the district was very small at the time that initial bonds were issued. At this point, the district is issuing at a much lower rate. For example, the bonds proposals that the district has received for this year are at about 2.2%. And so one of the opportunities that the district has next year with the special assessment is that the special assessment bond is callable. So the district does have the opportunity to refinance that bond at a lower rate. So as opportunities are presenting themselves, the district does intend to take advantage of those opportunities and try and reduce some of the initial issuances, which were very high.
Thank you. So I think what you're saying to us is that the special assessment has not been eligible to be refinanced until now, but will be eligible next year, and that we would certainly take a look at doing that, given current interest rates versus what that one is at.
Madam Chair, that's correct.
Thank you. Did you have anything more, Mr. Riley?
Yes. Yes, madam. Thank you. I think it was just to, again, reiterate. I think what I heard was having a more transparent, open invite to residents of CID meetings. Just wanted to make a note of that. I think that will help, answer questions not only for current homeowners, but future homeowners. So that was my final comment.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Anyone
Madam
else?
Chair.
Yes.
Madam Chair, can we have David, there was a question about David's email address. David, will you repeat your email address once again for folks tuning in?
I'm actually going to copy it into the chat. How about, does that work, David?
Yes, Madam Chair. And just to repeat it verbally, it's boisetreasury@cityofboise.org.
Can I go ahead and type your direct email into the chat?
Yeah, that would work too.
Okay, so I've just put the David Hasagawa's direct email into the chat. Anyone who'd like to contact him is welcome. Okay, Mr. Riley, were you done? Sounds like it.
Yes, thank you.
Go ahead.
No, thank you very much, madam. I'm done.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, anyone else?
Madam Chair, Tom Payne was able to reconnect and is asking if he could testify.
Okay. Mr. Payne, we'd love to hear from you if we can get the connection down.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Ah, wonderful. I reconnected. Thanks very much. I know that the meeting's running late. I'll be quick. A lot of things that I've wanted to address have been addressed.
Madam Chair.
I came into this only because as a new resident as well, I try to understand everything about the politics and the taxation. Yes.
Madam Chair.
Yes. I can hear you.
Councilmember Whittings has a comment.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mr. Payne, will you please turn off your video? Sometimes that helps with your audio quality. We're having a very hard time
Sure.
hearing you.
I will do. There it goes.
Thank you.
That's
Does that
better.
work?
Thank you.
Oh, let me give you my address as well. It's 2783 South Honeycomb Way, 83716.
Thank you.
Sure. And as I was saying, I got into this only because I had heard about a CID and I was trying to learn about it. I want to re-emphasize how difficult it was for me to learn anything about this. And I called it a random walk through the politicians to find how to deal with this and what I could learn. It was strictly a learning curve for me. And finally, I received David Hasakawa's email and called him, and he was very helpful. One suggestion I would have is that there's another HOA within our district, and one of the members of that HOA on the board is my neighbor, and my neighbor knows nothing about the CID. So I would ask that you would reach out to the other HOA and that you would ask at least that they might be a conduit of information as well and be informed, because it's shocking to me that they could not tell me about anything regarding this. Mills De Silva is my neighbor, and he's on the other board. The second thing that I was really trying to emphasize that Mr. Hasagawa just addressed is I come out of the financial world, and I was concerned about the rate of interest that the bonds were issued and understood that the new issues would come in a reissue in 2021. The CARE Act allowed for provisions of pre-funding bonds to be done, and then it was taken away and may be re-allowed. I don't know if the bond within the CID has the ability to be pre-funded or not, but my emphasis would be to simply say pre-fund it as soon as you can, unless it's statutorily set at that rate and a date is set. The other thing I was concerned about is that Mr. Hasagawa, again, we were talking briefly about bonding rates. And I called connections I have with municipal bond companies and talked to them about this. And as it's described, this country is in a income-starved position. There are all kinds of places looking for solid bonds, even non-rated bonds. In other words, that aren't rated for exceptionally good rates. And I want to emphasize the need to be competitively bid. I'm not sure if this particular bond issue is required to go to a local bank. Many are. It depends on the specifics of the levy. But I would just ask that those in making that decision, please be as competitive as you can be. The 10-year treasury is around 0.6 right now. And many municipals are coming in, not very high. Even 2.25 sounds good. And a reissue of our 9% is essential to help lower the costs. I'm retired and I'm here enjoying where I live. I can completely agree with Doug Fowler. There's a quality of life to living in Harris Ranch, and there's a quality of life and a value to what we have there. But I ask, in terms of the committee, in terms of Mr. Fowler and those making decisions about my bonding and my taxation, that you act as full fiduciaries in my behalf when the money is spent that I provide to you. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you and the opportunity particularly to learn more about this from all those involved, and want to thank so many. If the information about this meeting had been wider known and I'd had more time to talk with my neighbors, unfortunately, I'm over on the Oregon coast for a month, I think the participation and the feedback to you would have been even greater. And as this grows, you'll probably hear more. And I just think the information issue that you've addressed is going to be so important in the future as we go forward, not only for those looking to buy my home potentially in the future, but also those people that are looking to buy in the Harris Ranch. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Payne. Appreciate it. Madam
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I would add to Mr. Payne, there's nothing unfortunate about being on the Oregon coast for a month. That sounds glorious.
68 degrees. We have a little condo that we used to live in here and we kept it. So I can't tell you how nice it is. We escaped the 106.
Good for you.
Yep.
All right. Thank you. Madam Clerk, is there anyone else? Is there anyone else online
Madam
that
Chair.
would like to testify? If you would, please raise your hand. There's a button down below in the chat box that allows you to do that.
Madam Chair, it doesn't appear that there's anyone else that wants to testify.
There is no more.
There is not.
Okay. Looks like there's no one else who would wish to testify. So with that, I'd ask if there's any more questions before I close the public hearing of staff.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I have some comments that aren't necessarily questions that are germane to the budget resolution. So I'm wondering when I could offer those.
Those until after we've determined what to do on the budget resolution. I think it would be appropriate to have a little bit more discussion.
Great.
All right, thank you. Well, I don't have any more that, I guess I do have one more that's germane to the budget resolution that's before us. And that is the budget. And David, I wonder if you could pull the budget up so that folks online could see it. And those of us, I've got it in front of me, but I know some people may not. I just want to understand the contingent revenues and then the total budget appropriation beyond the debt service, the interest, the principal, and the new bond that's being proposed. And just if you'd clarify exactly what that is. Oh, are you having trouble getting it up there?
I've got it on the screen. If Matt's able to launch it from there, that'd be great. Otherwise, I'm joining the Zoom.
Okay.
Oh,
Oh, there we go. Thank you, Matt.
yes, absolutely. So if you can see the line above total revenue says that, and let me zoom in a little bit because that looks a little small. All right. So if you see the line above total revenue that says total other financing sources 2 million, That is when we dropped the budget, we put together an estimate in conjunction with our financial advisor based on rates and based on the available capacity within the levy on what we expect to be able to receive from a lender. And so that is the expectation of that 2 million. Now, there is a chance that a lender could come back and offer either a much lower rate or a bond that is a 20-year bond as opposed to a 15-year bond. And just the same as you would with your house, if you go from 15 years to 30 years, it means that you can borrow more. And so that's the case here as well. Now, last year we did receive a 20-year bond and had more capacity. And so those contingent revenues are a reserve so that if a lender comes in and offers a 20-year bond at a much lower rate than we're expecting, that we can do a budget adjustment and use those additional revenues. The offers that we received are in fact just slightly over 2 million. They're about 2.1 million. And so we will in fact end up doing that. But that's the contingent revenues on the top. And then we also have similarly a budget appropriation on the bottom to then spend those.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that that was clear for folks. And here's my question then around that. If we end up with a 15-year or we end up without a need to use that contingent appropriation, if we have already certified the budget at 2.85%, that would be the levy that would be set. And we have to do that by September 17th. Is that correct?
Yes, Madam Chair, we do need to ultimately submit the budget in early September to Ada County.
And so I guess my question is, as I'm understanding what room we have to meet our obligations to fund the plan and refund the expenses that are eligible to the Development Corporation and our obligation to our taxpayers, the one choice we may have in the next month or so, is to determine whether or not the 2.85 would be the levy rate we'd ask for next year. And based on that, whether or not we collect the full 5 million or we collect a little bit less. Am I correct on that?
Yes, Madam Chair, we do have some options to look at and to determine whether that 2.85 mils is indeed the correct levy.
Okay, so having asked that, on the other hand, if we fail to move the budget resolution forward today, we chance failing to certify the budget. And if we fail to certify the budget, we'll be in, we will not be able to keep our obligation to the development agreement as required by state law. Is that also correct?
Madam Chair, that's correct, as well as the requirements to Ada County to submit the budget and have it certified on time.
Okay. So with that end of questions, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. I never like to close the public hearing while we're still, close it before we ask all the questions. With that, as chair, I'm going to make one comment and then ask Councilmember Woodings, since I'm chairing the meeting, to decide what direction we should go here. My comment is this. As we said in the beginning, we've never gotten a lot of comment on this process or on this budget. It's clear to me that there are some things that we can do a lot better. And as I said earlier, I make a commitment to figure those out and do that, especially in terms of communication and access availability of records. Having said that, we also have an obligation based on state law to the development agreement that we built this community infrastructure district around. And as such, we have an obligation to reimburse those expenses that have been deemed eligible. And those included in this year's budget have in fact been deemed eligible by our staff, which looked at them not through any bias, but through the state law, through the development agreement, and through the information that we collected and was provided around the infrastructure that's being proposed. And so, at least in my mind, I believe we're obligated to go forward with a budget this year and begin discussions on how and if this infrastructure district matures in the future. With that, I would open it to Councilmember Whittings.
Madam Chair, I'm going to go ahead and make a motion, and then I have some comments to provide after that. I move that we approve HRCID 8-2020, a resolution approving the FY 2021 operating budget for the Harris Ranch Community Infrastructure District Number 1 and providing an effective date.
Second.
Madam Chair, I just want to note that I really appreciate everyone really speaking up this year. This is like, actually, when I say that we have never heard anything from residents of Harris Ranch, I'm not exaggerating. Like, this is actually the first year we have heard a peep from people living in the CID. And so I really appreciate all of the feedback, allowing us to really gain better understanding of how things are rolling out, how things are going, what sorts of changes perhaps need to be made. And I think I have a running list of follow-up items that I have as a member of this board as well. So while I see it as our statutory duty to ensure that we're passing this budget so that we can uphold our duties, I definitely don't see this as the end of any conversation, very much just the beginning. And I look forward to working with folks to be sure that we have greater transparency, that everyone feels engaged in the process, and that this is, the CID is working the way that it should to improve the infrastructure in what's an incredibly beautiful neighborhood. And everyone that lives out there is lucky to do so. We visit quite a lot. And so that's my justification for making the motion. And thank you for the second, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So my comment, I commented before the motion was made, but I agree with Councilmember Whittings that we do have an obligation to certify a budget. I've heard a lot of concerns that I've noted, and I have a list of things that I think we'll be looking into. I see two more questions on the chat, which include, is there a detailed list of the planned expenditures? I will ensure that we get that out, and I don't know exactly how we'll get it to you. I think we have emails of most of the people who've testified today. If we don't have your email, if you want to send it to David, I did put his email in the chat. We'll make sure and email that detail to all of you. And then in addition, ongoing, we will look at ways to improve notification, improve dissemination of information in general, and improve the transparency of what's being paid for within this CID. And with that, would the clerk please call the roll?
Clegg,
Yes.
Woodings,
Yes.
motion carries.
Motion carries. Although that's all that's listed on our agenda today, I think we can always have discussion on items that came up during hearing, and I think Councilmember Whittings has such.
Yes, Madam Chair. I would just like to, I'd like to ask, I think probably David and perhaps Mr. Fowler, I have a list of things that I would like to have on our CID page on the city website. And I think some of these are the map of the CID district boundary. the inventory of those reimbursable projects by year. A link to the state statute that formed the Community Infrastructure District, and the makeup of the Community Infrastructure District Board with contact information. Another note that I had was, I think, the Planning and Development Services Department sends out little notification postcards on development. I feel like we could probably do something similar for the Community Infrastructure District to all members residing inside the district, detailing the budget process in advance of our budget next year and what those dates will be. Of course, this year we weren't able to stick to the dates as closely as we usually do, but normally our dates are pretty well set out for the process. So those are some of the notes that I had.
Thank you, Councilmember Woodings. I guess I would like to consider the first, other than the notification by mail, unanimous consent request. And I certainly don't object that we just get that done. I think the notification by mail, we'll have to look into the cost benefit. I think it certainly makes sense to do it, but it will have to come out of the administrative costs of the district, I would guess. So we'll just have to make sure that it's in the budget so that we can. So
great.
Thank you. With that, I would also thank everyone who joined us today. Really appreciate your input. I think you'll end up with a better district as a result. I know you will. And that's always what public input should be about. And I appreciate that. With that, I take a motion to adjourn.
Madam Chair, I move that we adjourn.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.